Well, I'm really excited to be here, and we're going to get moving right away because we have a lot of stuff to cover. So change is around us everywhere, and we know that to be true. And my clicker, there we go. And we know that to be true, whether it's weather, electronics, healthcare. We know it is changing, and it changes so dramatically. And what we also know is that we look at change and we categorize it as metaphors sometimes. And one common metaphor that we oftentimes hear change as being referred to is that of a journey. But if you think about change as a journey, I want us to walk through this example here and understand why this probably isn't the best example of all. Now, here we are, starting point A, we want to get to point B. And as we move through this particular journey, we come across milestones, we come across roadblocks. We even climb up that metaphorical hill. We even use a vehicle which represents a strategy for us. But let me ask, when you take a look at that road, it's one road, one direction, one way. Is change ever like that? Yes or no? Never, is it? And so that metaphor I like to just toss out. A much, much better metaphor that I'd like to refer us to today is that change is much more like that of a kaleidoscope. Because if you think about a kaleidoscope, you see a beautiful image when you look through it. And with just one little tiny nudge of that barrel, you see something completely different. Something completely perhaps more beautiful, perhaps better and enhanced, perhaps not. We all know that not all changes work well. But what we do know is that this is much more realistic as it relates to change, because you can never take that and roll it back. And as with all changes, we can never go back. It always has to be a forward movement. And that's just what change is. And if you look at it in terms of change around our businesses, it's just like that. Now, when change occurs, usually we fall into one of three groups. Those that really try to embrace change and end up thriving, those who adapt to change and merely survive, or those that resist change and unfortunately oftentimes fade away. And none of us really want to be that type of organization, right? Or part of those teams. So with that, here's what we're going to cover today. Now, I'm not sure if you printed out your handouts or not that I did publish, but if you did, you can refer to those. I'll be referring to certain page numbers along the way, and if you didn't, not a big deal, okay? So the learning objectives that we're going to cover today is we're going to look at change and how it represents not only a challenge, but also an opportunity. And I know that word is so overused, but I'm going to talk about really how we can really embrace change and look at it through a different lens. Next, we're going to look at our responses to change and our reactions to change and those of our teams. Because oftentimes people react based on their own past experiences, based on how change has affected them in the past, whether it's positive or negative. Sometimes it has nothing to do with the current change that you are trying to implement or your company is trying to implement. So we have to understand some of those reactions and what they mean for us and how we can better manage them. We're also going to take a look at accountability and how we can take more and stronger accountability for some of the changes and small things that we can do that will have a large impact in terms of an influential change agent that we all are. Because whether we like it or not, we're all change agents. Whether we want to be a positive influence or a negative influence, we certainly do influence the changes around us. And then last but not least, we're going to take a look at adopting new tools, discovering new ways of taking a look at change as it relates to communication, productivity, and resistance, as well as communication. So that's kind of our roadmap for today. Not a journey, but a roadmap. All right, so on your handouts, in your handouts, if you're using them, I just want you to reference page 2 and page 3. And for those of you who haven't printed them out, this is a great resource. They represent assessment tools, assessments that I've developed. Page 2 represents assessments for your leaders. Page 3 represents assessments for individual contributors. And what's important, as you all know as HR professionals, is that you have to be able to benchmark something to know whether or not it is improving. So your time here today learning about different changes, and if you've also went to other change management or change strategy sessions, you'll be able to benchmark where you are today and then take that same assessment, make as many copies of it as you want, and take that same assessment 6, 9, or 12 months from now and see if you have enhanced as a team or as an individual. So it's a great, great resource. So moving forward, our world is driving change, and it's changing at a massive speed, and we know that. I mean, let's just look at a small segment being technology. Technology has changed our world today. I mean, look at smartphones today, right? I mean, 10 years ago, our world is so drastically different. In fact, if we take a look back at 1980, 5 mobile phone subscriptions for every million people. Today, there are more than 90 for every 100. Another stat, 4 out of 5 people use smartphones to shop. Raise your hand if you're one of them. Yeah, I think 4 out of 5 is even a low number, okay? I mean, heck, I did it on the plane as I was waiting to deplane. It's kind of fun, right? Okay. Hey, that was a little joke. Give me a little humor. Show me some love. Yeah, okay, a little bit. We'll work on that. Since its creation in 2004, Facebook has emerged, right? It has grown to over 1,000 million subscribers. And I don't know if you knew this stat, but an iPad at its peak was sold every 3 seconds. Craziness, right? So this is the world we live in today. It's changing, and it's changing so very rapidly. So we have to figure out ways to not only become more agile, but really change our focus and our influence and look at it in a different way. So that's what our focus is going to be today. Now, let me ask you this question. Could you change if change really mattered? Could you change? Let's say somebody approached you, someone that you respect, approached you and said you had to make several daunting and life changes in the way you act and in the way you think. And if you didn't, your time would end soon. Do you think that you could change when change really mattered? Yes or no? Yes or no? Yes. Yeah. Most of us do say that. Unfortunately, according to Dr. Ray Levy, who is the founder of the Global Medical Forum, he says the odds are 9 to 1 against you. 9 to 1 against you. Let's take a look at drug addicts, okay? Do you think they wake up one day and say, yeah, that's what I aspire for, or as they're going through that process, they want to get out of it and they can't? Take this example. Teenager. Drug overdose. 3 stints in different facilities, including 7 stints in jail by the age 19. Do you think he wanted that? The answer is absolutely not. Ask my son. He's almost through it, and he's 20. So change is difficult for every single one of us at different times of our life. I want you to do something for me. I want you to look around the room, and I want you to spot with your eyes all those things that you can that are the color red. Spot with your eyes all those things that are the color red. And try to remember them, all those things that are the color red. Okay, now all eyes right here, please. Who can tell me 3 things that are the color blue? Oh, that burns, doesn't it? Now, I know that was an intentional gotcha. I'm sorry to do that to you, especially on the last day, the last presentation, right? Here's the point. We see what we're looking for. What we focus on becomes our reality. Are you focusing in on the positive things in your life or the negative? Because what you focus on becomes your reality. And changes that we endure are difficult for many of us, and I would argue most of us. But we have to look at ways that we can move through it and look at our reactions during the process. So what I want you to do, if you have your handout on the bottom of page 1, I want you to consider a change. And if you don't have that handout, just consider a change that you are currently facing. Now, it could be a professional one or even a personal one. You won't have to share this with anyone. But I want you to consider a change that you're facing today and what makes it so doggone challenging. Because we're going to be looking back at that particular change throughout today's program. And we're going to be applying some of the strategies to that change. Now, I will open it up to the audience if there's anyone who wants to share a particular change that they're going through. Anybody willing to do that? Excellent. Thank you very much. You come to the bookstore after this presentation. I'm doing a book signing, and I'll give you a free book. So what change are you currently? We have some microphones going around. If you could just come forward. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. If you can tell me your change that you're currently going through and what makes it so challenging. And what's your name? Marianne. I think we have a microphone issue. If we could draw the other microphone over there. You can yell nice and loud. That's okay. Why don't you yell, Marianne?
My change is transitioning jobs. Consultant, and I'm rolling off my client in 6 weeks.
Wow. So she's transitioning jobs in 6 weeks, and it's going to be a really big deal. I can't even imagine, right? And are you changing industries too, or no?
I have no idea. It depends on my next job.
Okay. All right. I get it. Really tough. Very stressful, right?
Yes.
So, yeah. So let's give Marianne a round of applause, which will show some support for her. You come by for that free book. All right. So as we're considering that change, let's move forward. Now, we know that embedded in every change is challenge, and we know that to be true. It is absolutely challenging. But what we also know is that it's not the change itself that becomes so challenging. Rather, it's the transition. And let's think about that. When we're told about a change, it's stressful. Just like your change, right? However, when you're experiencing the change, when you're actually reacting to it, is when it becomes really daunting. Because there are so many more questions than there are answers, and we have to learn ways and strategies to move through it. So let's look at this, okay? As it looks, a change, as we're going through it, it's very rational, very logical. We understand change for our businesses at an intellectual level. We understand why, who, and some of the reasons. Now, when we take a look at the transition, it's very different, because when you're in the midst of that, it's very emotional, very psychological, and oftentimes extremely personal, right? We take a personal interest in that, which makes it even that much harder on us. So this is why it becomes tough for us. So what we're talking about are reactions, and I want us to take a look at some of those reactions. So just a couple polling questions here that you can just entertain yourself with and see if you can guess them correctly. So there are 4 reactions we display as a result of a change. Which reaction is usually felt first? A, resistance, B, denial, C, commitment, or D, acceptance. Pardon me? We got a lot of different ones, but I think B, denial, was very loud. Okay, so very good. Okay, that is the one that we usually feel first. Let's go to the second one. What reaction do we strive for where productivity increases and the positive effects of the change are realized? A, resistance, B, denial, C, commitment, or D, acceptance? I'm hearing C and D. And the correct answer is C, commitment. Why? Let's take a look at these 4 different reactions that we do feel. And they're very common reactions, but the thing is this. If you or someone on your team, or even a family member, colleague, friend, you sense that they are getting stuck in one of these particular reactions, put your arm around them, not literally, I know we're an HR group, but, put your arm around them in that sense and say, hey, can I help you out? At least lean in, listen a little bit, and see if we can help them through it in some way, shape, or form. Now, these are the 4 reactions: denial, resistance, acceptance, and commitment. What we're going to do is we're going to take a quick peek at each of the 4. So, reaction number 1, denial. Denial is where we're in that victim mentality where we're like, we do not want to be dealing with this, right? But the reality of the change hits, and we need to help our people by giving them information. So whether it's an organizational change or a team change or maybe even a small change, What's important to know is that people need information, but they can only digest little pieces of it in this first reaction, because otherwise they're going to be absolutely overwhelmed. Now, one example that we can all relate to here, at least identify with, is the Benghazi attack in Libya on 9/11/2012. The reaction here, one reaction, was denial. How could we ever have an attack like this on U.S. soil again? Let's move to the next one. Reaction 2, resistance. Resistance is the second reaction that we almost all feel in this order. And here we have to have careful planning and preparation. Otherwise, sometimes chaos and crisis can emerge if we don't manage it properly. So here, one example is Hurricane Katrina in 2006. Utter devastation. Now, the reaction was resistance. Resistance for many just reasons. But nonetheless, they resisted because they didn't want to leave their homes. I mean, I can't even imagine that decision. But what happened was over almost 2,000 people lost their lives and over 100,000 homes were destroyed. Utter devastation. Let's go to reaction number 3, which is acceptance. And this is kind of the turning point for organizations. This is when the organization starts to tip forward in terms of the change, in terms of how people feel about the change and how the productivity is starting to move in that direction. Yet, we're not supposed to worry about productivity here. Here, it's all about learning. Now, I want to stress that because oftentimes what happens in companies is that once people kind of get on board with a particular change, they want results, right? Because you're not only doing your old job, but you're learning the new way of doing something, and they want results, so they push. Yet, one thing we have to remember is during this particular reaction, if you don't learn it here, you're rarely going to learn it. You probably will never learn it. Because this is the time where you have to take it all in, understand the right and the wrong, not necessarily how to do it faster and better. It's how to do it right. One example here is recycling. Many people bucked recycling when it first came out. I'll raise my hand. I did initially. Any other people want to raise their hand? Just a little? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. But the thing here is, it takes time, it takes support, and once you actually accept the recycling, it's kind of a hip, cool, sexy thing to do. And in fact, if you don't, it's unacceptable today. It's expected. If you were to throw a can in the waste container next to a waste and a canned container, and there was a group of people around, you'd probably have a few people look at you a little bit different, right? Because why wouldn't you put that can in that recycling tub? So acceptance is a big piece. And we feel that, I don't want to say pressure, but we feel that from the other people around us, which is good. All right, let's move to reaction number 4, which is commitment. And commitment is where the productivity happens. This is where the results are achieved. This is where people gain that productiveness. This is where you see the efficiencies, you see faster, easier work schemes, work processes. And one particular thing that I want to point out here is that we have to be able to cheer a little, right? And have some not only have success, but feel good about that success and reward people for the success. You know, I always say, when you go to a football game, you know, do you wait until the very end of the game when your team wins to get up and cheer? Or every time that they get a touchdown or even make 10 yards, if we're talking about football, make that next first down, hey, you're happy, right? You might high five, maybe not every 10 yards, okay, but every touchdown. We have to be able to acknowledge those successes and celebrate them and reward them when they're meaningful, right? Because we don't want to have a party for everything, because then it won't mean a thing. One example here is the memorial at Ground Zero. This is a place now where we remember This is a place where we feel a strong sense of patriotism, a strong sense of that we've moved through it and we're healing. And it's also a great place where we feel an enormous sense of optimism. I have not yet been there, and that is my goal. All right, so in addition to those 4 phases, and actually let me just back up for a moment. I want you to think about that one change that I asked you to think about earlier. Your own change. Which reaction are you currently in today? Or which reaction is your team or your organization currently feeling today? And maybe there are ways to help move them through that. Now, let's go to the 3 phases. 3 phases of change, very common. Disruption, transition, rebuilding. Now, disruption is all about forgetting the old way of doing things and learning a new way of doing things. I'm going to ask someone else. So, who recently changed jobs in the last 6 to 12 months? All right. Can I work with you? Who can I work with? Raise your hand if you'd like to, if I can work with you. Okay, thank you. And what's your name? Robin. So you switched jobs in the last 6 to 12 months. How long ago? 6 weeks. Okay. So in your last job, what did you do? Okay, so Director of Human Resources for a small organization. And where are you working today? What are you doing today?
I am the Director of Human Resources for a very, very large company.
Okay. So quite a step up, it appears. Very nice. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Show her some love. All right. Now, let me ask you. On the last day of your last job, I want you to look at that and feel that versus the first day of your awesome new job, okay? On the last day of your last job, you know who your supervisor is, you know your direct reports, you know what's expected, you know what your objectives are for the year, you know what it takes to get that carrot, get that raise. I don't like carrots, I like intrinsic rewards, but to get that raise or to get that promotion or to feel good or to be accepted for that next promotion upward, you know all of that stuff, right? Now, on the first day of your new job, let's visualize walking into that really cool company in this really cool, exciting new job, yet doesn't know her staff, probably met her boss once or twice, maybe, if he or she's still there, because sometimes during you giving notice, you have a new boss when you come on board. Yikes, right? You don't know the expectations. You really don't understand, kind of how the office politics work. You don't really understand all of those details. Heck, you may not even know where the restroom is. So a little stressful? Absolutely. So think about that, dramatically different. So as you're going through a transition, you have to let go of the comfortable old way of doing things before you can even begin to accept the new way. How many times do you hear people talk about their last job when they join a new company? And for a while it's okay, right? But after a while you're like, hey, you've been here a year. Can you let it go? Just talking about everything as it relates to that past job. So, all good. All right. The second one is transition, and it's an exploratory stage. There is no doubt about it. I always look at this kind of like a trapeze artist hanging on to one bar and getting ready to go through the tent, so to speak, through the middle of the air, getting ready to grab that next bar, but absolutely hanging on to nothing. It is absolute ambiguity. It's stressful, lots of questions. That's what a transition feels like. And if there's one thing I hope you take away from this program is that we have to get faster at moving through transitions. And I'm going to show you why, and I'm going to put dollars and cents to it. The last one is the rebuilding phase. It's all about changing so that we get better. Let me give you an example. I used to work for Anchor Food Products, the #1 frozen appetizer company in the world. They made the jalapeno popper. Y'all probably heard of the jalapeno popper. It was great. And then they were bought out by the #1 potato or French fry company in the world at the time, which I think they still are, which is McCain Foods. Now, when McCain took over Anchor, you know, we had to adapt and change to their computer systems, of course. Now, as you take a look at this, the disruption phase was understanding that this is really happening, and that, yeah, I've been there for 8.5 years, and yeah, I'm going to have to learn a whole new way of doing my job. So yeah, disruption, absolutely, right? The next one, though, was transition, and that's when you have to not only do your current job, but learn the new way of doing things, which can be extremely daunting and tough, but we are expected to do it. But then the rebuilding phase, and you actually get to see then the efficiencies. You get to see your productivity increase. Better yet, you get to see maybe yourself leaving for home a little bit earlier because you actually know what you're doing. So there is some light at the end of that tunnel, but we have to be able to move through that transition fast enough to get there. Now, knowing this, having this information, being armed with this information is fabulous. I know, right? But just because you have information doesn't mean people want to change. To explain that a little bit more, I'd like to introduce you to Dan Heath. He's an author. He's going to share a little bit why this is important.
When we want people to change, a lot of times we try to teach them something. We feel like, well, if Dad just understood the health complications that are caused by obesity, well, surely he would change his eating habits. Or if my teenage daughter just understood how dangerous it is to text while she's driving, surely she'd cut it out. The problem, though, is that knowledge rarely leads to change. I mean, for instance, take the warning labels on most cigarette packs. Here's one. Cigarettes release carbon monoxide. I mean, do we think that the problem is that smokers simply don't know that cigarettes are bad for them? This isn't a knowledge problem, and the same's true for lots of other behaviors. John Cotter, the organizational change guru from Harvard, says that most people have a mental model that change happens in 3 stages. We present careful analysis, and that causes people to change their thinking, which leads to behavior change. But he says in his experience, that's almost never the way it happens. That in his experience, it happens in a different 3-stage process. People see something that makes them feel something that gives them the fuel to change. So if you want people to change, you've got to put feeling first. Let's go back to the cigarette packs for a sec, because there are other countries that actually do a much better job at connecting with emotion. So here's a pack in Italy, for instance. The translation of that is, smoking kills. In Canada, they even push it a step further. They put photos on their packs like this one. Ugh. I mean, you may want that cigarette, but you catch a glimpse of those teeth and it gives you a second thought. What about this one? I think this is genius. You know, which one do we think is going to be better for the 17-year-old male psyche? The knowledge that cigarette smoking releases carbon monoxide, or that this could happen to you? If you want your colleagues at work to change, you've got to start thinking about what you can get them to feel. You know, can you bring them face to face with customers who are underserved and have them feel some empathy? Can you confront them with some of your competitors' products that are actually better than yours? Get a little competitive spark going. But whatever you do, just don't think that your job is done after you've shared some knowledge. Change comes from feeling.
So, more importantly than just sharing this knowledge, I would like to apply some money to this particular change, okay? So let's understand the financial impact of changes. Now, once again, this is in your handout and also the PowerPoint slides, so I'm going to go through it quickly, but just know it's in there for your reference, okay? So, there are approximately 22 work days in a month. If you take, actually let me just back up. We're going to take a snapshot, a very small snapshot to show you the financial difference of a impactful change, okay? So we're going to take a subset of 10 employees, and these 10 employees make $40,000 as their annual salary. We're going to take a look at a 6-month transitionary period for a change, which is absolutely small in most cases. Think of systems changes, reorgs, all different types of processes. And according to the change experts like Price Pritchett, it is said that when you are in the midst of a transition of a change, 3 hours out of every 8 is spent doing some type of unproductive work. 3 hours. Whether it's looking online for another job, calling a spouse, calling a friend, texting, emailing, staring into space, talking at the water cooler, you get it, okay? 3 hours. So let's walk through this example. 22 work days in a month, 22 days times the 6-month transitionary period equals 132 work days. If you take that number of work days times the 3 hours of lost productivity, you get 396 lost hours per employee, okay? If you take their annual salary, divide it by 2, is $20,000 because they make $40,000 a year and because it's a 6-month transition. And if you take that and divide it by the 132 days, divided by the 8 hours in a day, if that's how many we work, sometimes a lot more, but let's just look at that, you get an hourly rate. If you take the hourly rate, lost hours times the hourly rate, you get $7,500 in 6 months per employee. Multiply it by 10, and you get a whopping $75,000. Now, I don't know about you, but rarely do changes impact only 10 people, right? And rarely do they only last 6 months. So you can do the math for your own organization, for your own changes, and put dollars and cents to it. Now, what I do know is that we have to get more agile in moving through that transition faster. And I want you to do an activity for me. And this is why I wanted you to have your pen and your pencil, pen or pencil and a piece of paper ready. So if you have that handy, you can use any kind of paper, whatever. Little scratch sheet of paper, okay? Get those things out. And you can't ask any questions with this activity, okay? Are you game? Yes? Yeah, it's going to be some fun, right? How many times do you get to play games? All right, so here we go. I want you, in the next 20 seconds, to write your name as many times as you can. Go. Stop. Add them up. I didn't hear any complaining, so that was good. All right, so how many you got? At least 10? Raise your hand. Anybody with 20? Okay, we have a few. Okay, excellent. All right, so we did pretty good. Now, here's what we know. During change transitions, and I'll be careful with how I say this, do you ever get invited to increase your performance? Yes or no? Do you ever get invited? Yeah. Yeah, it's a nice invitation, isn't it, to increase your performance? So I would like to invite you to increase your performance. Now, I know you're all HR people, so I'm going to throw out a hypothetical bonus. Okay, it's hypothetical. Y'all heard me, okay? Hypothetical. So let's say I give you $2,000, okay? A hypothetical $2,000 if you're able to increase your performance. So let's say I give you the same 20 seconds. Do you think you could write your name at least one more time? Yes or no? Yes, yes or no? Yes. All right, so get ready. Get that piece of paper and that pen ready. Now, there's something you need to know. Our organization has recently went through some restructuring, and oh, by the way, your boss just left. Your 20 seconds is getting ready to start. Use your other hand. Go. Stop. Add them up. Now here's the question. I didn't hear much complaining, so, us HR people are really, really good about that. So, Yeah, because you hear about it all the time, right? Yeah. Oh, it's under your breath. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Okay, so who increased their performance? Raise your hand. Come on, there's got to be at least one. Way in the back. Way in the back. Anybody else? Yep, there's a hand up there. So we got two. Anybody else? We got one over the two over there. We got two here. Now, I can hear a little bit of the moaning. Really? Right? Okay, so I didn't give you many rules, right? But can I ask one of you to tell me what you did different the second time versus the first? Yes. Louder, please. Say it again. You wrote faster. Okay, she wrote faster. Excellent strategy. Great job. And you were successful too? And what did you do? You used your initial? Now,
rules, right?
Now, thank you.
There was no rules.
Now, y'all laughed, right? But did I tell you you couldn't? So during times of change, we do not have all the answers, nor do we give all the directions necessary or even directions that we know of. But sometimes our employees need to take it upon themselves to take ownership of problems or unknowns and do the best they can to get a positive result. And your first name is? Deborah. Just like Deborah did. So sometimes we do have to figure out ways to do it faster, like she did in the back. And sometimes we have to figure out ways to make it more creative. But regardless, if we don't work through that transition fast enough, we will cost our organizations money and lots of it. Now, costing our organization money and having to move through that change transition fast is just one of those dynamics that we do face during times of change. Here are several more. No matter how exciting a change is, expect a sense of loss. Anybody recently have a baby? You did? Okay, so what's your name? Anna? Kelly? Nellie, thank you. Okay, so Nellie just recently had a baby. Did you have a boy or a girl?
Another girl.
Another girl, as she says with a little depression. No, I'm kidding. Well, I have to say, when I had my second son, you know the sonogram? I'm like, no, it can't be a boy. Well, it is a boy. It can't be a boy. No, it is a boy. And it's all recorded, you know. I'm like, I got to burn that tape. All right, so you had a second girl, or is this number 3 or?
Number 2. That's
number 2. Now, let's see, Nellie. How many of you are parents in the audience? Raise your hand. Okay, cool. Most of us, I would say. Now, we're going to answer the questions for Nellie, okay? So we're talking about a sense of loss. So now that she's had baby number 2, what has she lost? Sleep, her life? Okay, that's a little pessimistic, yeah. But understand, especially as a newborn, 2 things, yeah. Wait until you have 3, you're outnumbered. Good luck, okay? I've got 3. Good luck, all right? But I'm kidding. Kids are fabulous, absolutely. But you do have a sense of loss. What else besides those? Time, money, freedom. It's so much harder to carry around 2 or be responsible for 2 than it is for 1. So there is a sense of loss. Now, thank you, Nellie. Appreciate that.
Thanks.
No matter how competent people are, expect a sense of a loss of ambiguity. Now, I don't know how it is around Washington, D.C., but where I live in Wisconsin, in the city of Neenah, anybody near the city of Neenah in Wisconsin? Okay, you are. In a, let's say, 2-mile radius, there's like 6 or 7 roundabouts. That's sheer craziness. Do you really need that many roundabouts? And they're not just the simple ones. They're like the multi-lane ones, and ones that go onto the highway, and ones that go down to side roads, ones that go to regular roads. I mean, it's really confusing. And I look at myself as somewhat intelligent person. Why can't I figure this out? I mean, I visualize myself going around and around. Now, I've never done that, but okay, ambiguity is one of those things we have to take a look at. Just a little joke. Okay, expect loss and ambiguity to lead to deterioration of trust. That comes out in terms of finger pointing, maybe lack of participation on teams, maybe lack of information sharing, all these different ways. Now, another thing is to anticipate some negative resistance. Now, let's talk about resistance. Let's say on Monday and Tuesday, you are talking, debating, respectfully disagreeing with your boss and with other colleagues. Is that resistance? Is that healthy resistance? The answer is yes. It's healthy resistance. Resistance is a natural attempt, and let me say that again, a natural attempt for us to slow down the process. So as we look at resistance, let's look at negative resistance. So Monday and Tuesday, you are debating with your boss, respectfully disagreeing, pushing back. On Wednesday, the decision is made. On Wednesday, essentially, the voting booth door has closed. I like that analogy because the decision is made. Any more resistance starting Thursday has now moved into what I call defiance. You had the ability to make changes, impart your ideas, share your concerns on Monday and Tuesday, but after the decision is made, we have to get on board. Now, I think many of us sometimes, as leaders, don't necessarily explain that process to our teams and our direct reports and our organizations. And I think sometimes that's when people push back a little bit harder because they didn't realize that that window closed or that it was about to close and when it was going to close. If we communicate, increase our communication just a little bit to tell them when and why and how, that will be perceived a little bit better. No one wants to be changed, right? We want to be part of the change if it's going to change, rather than being told, you will do this. No one likes it. So as we take a look at resistance, now let's take a look at a broader perspective in terms of a big team or big organizational change. Now we know in an organization, statistically, we have about 20% of our employees that really want to support change initiatives that we initiate throughout our companies, okay, that we decide on and try to move it forward. Why? Because these individuals want to support the change. They go along with most of what the company says because that's what they do. We also know, though, that about 30% of people don't. It doesn't mean that they're negative. It means that they dig in their heels with change because they're far more resistant, negatively resistant against change. 50%, the largest group, represents the fence sitters. It represents those people who are sitting on the fence. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to stay there. They're going to either go on this side of the fence with the supporters or this side of the fence with the resistors. And what we know is this. The tipping point for change happens at about a third. Could I have some water? Would you mind? Excuse me, please. Thank you very much. So the tipping point happens at about a third, okay? So what we know is that the organization at a third, it tips, and the momentum of the change dramatically moves forward. Now, how many percentage points do the resistors need to reach the tipping point? 3. Only 3. And then what happens is the change fails. And they are recruiting from that center group. They are actively recruiting, because that's what they do, from the fence sitters group. So where do we need to spend all of our time and attention? Because you know we're not going to change those resistors. Where do we focus on? Fence sitters, absolutely. Time and attention has to be focused there because that will give us the most bang. So as we take a look at different strategies to help manage resistance and productivity, I want to look at this slide a little bit, and I want us to understand a little bit what it means. I want your eyes to drop down, if it would please, to be visible. I once had a manager come up to me and say, you know, I think everybody's really adapting to this change really well. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you. Oh, you come by the bookstore too. You get a free book too. I'm not kidding. You're awesome, thank you. I usually have a glass, excuse me, and I didn't grab one. I know you're feeling pain from me right now. It's really okay. All right, so be visible. So this leader said, I think everybody's really reacting to the change great because I don't really hear anything. I don't really hear any water cooler talk. I really don't hear any resistance. I don't really hear it. Well, guess what? That particular boss was not visible enough, which caused people to still communicate, still disagree, still resist, yet the boss didn't know about it. I got some water. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So just because you don't hear about it doesn't mean it's not there. In fact, go looking for it because then you're the first one to hear about it. Be visible. Ask those questions. Walk around. The other two that are highlighted I want us to focus on first. Demonstrate patience and be accountable. Patience is one of those things as a leader we have to be able to demonstrate. If you have a parent that's flipped out, a kid will flip out, right? Well, it's no different in an office environment. If you have executives or higher level leaders that are reacting poorly or reacting with a lot of anxiety, your teams and your organization and your individuals are going to react the same way. But if you're able to keep it a little bit under, a little bit cooler, other employees will also be able to help resist kind of getting really upset and really bothered by it. Doesn't mean they won't, it just means that it won't get them there faster. Also, be accountable for actions. I want us to do 2 quick polling questions, one related to patience and one related to actions. First, what are effective strategies to exercise greater patience during change initiatives? This one's going to be a little bit harder. So A, dismiss negative self-talk. B, actively listen to the concerns of others. C, seek perspective from a trusted resource. D, judge less, empathize more. E, pinpoint triggers that cause you to lose patience. F, look for patterns of impatience and try to identify the root cause. G, letters B through F. Or H, all of the above. Yell out your answer. Okay, I heard B, I heard G, I heard H. Any others? G is the correct answer, which means it does not include A, dismiss negative self-talk. Why do I say not to include that? Because I don't believe we should be dismissing our self-talk. Even though we're our own worst critics, I think we need to understand why we have the negative self-talk. Why are we perpetuating those types of thoughts in our head? Are we overly nervous? Are we overly anxious? Do we not have enough information? Do we need to ask more questions? What is it? What is the cause? Let's go to the second one. What actions lead to being more accountable? Is it A, understand what you are responsible for? B, be honest? C, ask for feedback and make the recommended changes? D, apologize when something has gone wrong and you are responsible? E, use time wisely and don't overcommit? F, letters A, B, D, and E? G, letters A through E? Or H, all but A? Yell them out. I got F, D, G. Any more? Okay, the correct one here is F. And here's why. It does not include ask for feedback and make the recommended changes. Why not? Well, I believe, okay, so as a speaker and as a trainer, I get evals all the time. And I take my evals really seriously. I mean, I really do. I read every single one of them, as I will at this particular conference. But if I took every comment to heart and made a change about every, even snide comment, you know, sometimes people do that, I wouldn't even want to get out of bed in the morning, right? I mean, come on. I mean, I was at a conference once. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I was at a conference once, and one of the comments were, I could see your underwear line. Seriously? But you know what I did? I turned that into positive. I thought, you know what? If that is the worst comment that they can figure out and that they can write down, I must have rocked and rolled, right? I mean, come on. What do you want? Okay, so I'll never wear tight pants again. Okay. I didn't think they were tight, but obviously they were. So what are some other ways to manage resistance and productivity? Listen to what is said and what is not said. I want to have you watch a video by William Ury. He's a world-renowned mediator, and he's going to talk about the power of listening and why this particular piece is so important, and then we're going to do an activity that'll solidify it for you.
Listening, I believe, is the missing half of communication. Absolutely necessary, but often overlooked. We live in an age we call the age of communication, and certainly with a lot of cell phones and texts and tweets and emails, there's a lot of talking going on. But how much listening can there really be with so much interruption and distraction? So, my passion for the last 30 years has been helping people get to yes in very tough negotiations. From family feuds to boardroom battles, from labor strikes to civil wars. And I hear a lot of talking, but I don't hear a lot of real listening. So how do we listen? Well, it turns out that we often take listening for granted as something easy and natural. But in fact, at least in my experience, real listening, genuine listening, is something that needs to be learned and practiced every day. In ordinary listening, we're hearing the words, and we're often thinking, where do I agree? Where do I disagree? What am I going to say in response? In other words, the focus is on us. In genuine listening, however, the spotlight moves to the other person. We put ourselves in their shoes. We tune into their wavelength. We listen from within their frame of reference, not just ours. And that's not easy. In genuine listening, we listen not just for what's being said, but for what's not being said. We listen not just to the words, but to what's behind the words. We listen for the underlying emotions and feelings, the underlying needs, what that person really needs or wants. So if listening is so useful, why isn't everyone doing it? Well, to tell you the truth, it's not so easy. I mean, if I reflect on my own experience for a moment, there are times when I feel like, I'm listening pretty well in my work, only to go home and find out I'm not listening so well to my wife, for example. It's humbling, I can tell you. The real problem in the way, what makes it so hard to listen, is that there's so much going on in our minds, so much noise and distraction, that we don't have the mental and emotional space to be able to truly listen to the other side. So, how do we clear our minds? It may seem odd, but the secret I find is if we want to listen to the other side, we have to learn to listen to ourselves first. So what if, before an important or delicate or sensitive conversation, we took a moment of silence just to tune in, listen to where we are? I believe if we did that, if we listened truly to ourselves first, we would find it a lot easier to listen to others. So the final question is if we listened more, what difference would it make in the world? I believe it would make a huge difference. As in the course of my mediation work, I've personally witnessed the enormous cost of conflict, the broken relationships, the broken families, the stressed out workplaces, the ruinous lawsuits, the senseless wars. And what always strikes me is that the biggest opportunity that we have, actually, is to prevent these conflicts even before they start. How do we do that? It's not easy, but it almost always starts with one simple step: listening. In your next conversation with a colleague or a client, a partner or a child, a friend or a stranger, give them your full attention and listen to the human being behind the words. Because one of the biggest gifts we can give anyone is the gift of being heard.
I love that, the gift of being heard. Now, when people give you feedback, right, listening with an open mind is great. And I'm not saying discount some of that feedback, but what I'm saying is evaluate it, understand it, and make sure that you really recognize, is that something that I need to change? Check with another person that you value, that is a professional that you admire, someone that can give you an honest answer, or at least some honest insight. But another thing that he talked about is listen to what is being said and what is not being said. And I want us to do an activity. Get out a little piece of paper and a pen. In a moment, I'm going to show you 12 words on the screen. I'm going to ask you to just simply memorize those 12 words. I'm going to give you 15 seconds. I'm going to blank the screen. And then I'm going to ask you to write down and recall as many of those 12 words as you can. Okay? Sound good? So just memorize. Ready, set, begin. Raise your hand if you need more time. Like that would actually allow you to actually regurgitate more information, right? It's hard, I know. Okay, so how many of you got at least 7 names, or 7 words? All right, you rock and roll. Okay, 7 is the average. That means you're average. Woohoo! Yeah, any more than that, you really rock and roll, okay? All right, I won't go any higher. So, yeah, the number isn't that important, but what I want us to do now is take a look at the words that you did write down, okay? So by a high raise of hand, who wrote down the word bed? Excellent. Look around the room. Very good. You can put it down. Bed was the first word in the list. It represents first impressions. People remember what you say first. People remember what you say first. So make sure that when you're talking, you're addressing change management initiatives. When you're addressing communications to your teams or across the organization, people remember what you say first. Who wrote down the word eat nice and high? Look around the room. Eat. Okay, you can put it down. Eat represents the second word in the list, or the middle word in the list, if there is a middle with 12. But it also, more importantly, represents a word that was vastly different from the other words in the list, right? It had nothing to do with the other words. That's why it stuck out. So if you change the medium or the means or the method with which how you communicate during change initiatives, it will stick out. So if you want to do that, make sure it sticks out in a positive way and not a negative way, okay? Last word. Who wrote down the word sleep? Raise your hand, nice and high. Nice and high. Look around the room. Where is that word? How is that possible? No, I didn't trick ya. This time I did not trick ya, okay? It's exactly the same list. Do you remember what William Murray said? We have to listen to what is said, the words that are said, as well as listen to what is not said. How important is that? Because otherwise what happens is you see a word that isn't there. You draw your own conclusions, make your own assumptions, create truths where there aren't any. Does this ever happen in our organizations? Absolutely it does, right? So again, communicate not only what you do mean, but also what you don't mean. Because if you don't, that's where the rumors start, that's where the assumptions are made, and feelings oftentimes really get hurt. Now I'd like us to focus in on the last two pieces here for managing resistance and productivity. And not that we didn't cover the others are in the handout as well. But collaborate to maintain productivity, and reward courage and vulnerability. Now, is there someone in the audience that would like to partner with me on an activity? You would? Okay. Would you be so kind to come up here with me? And you get a free book too if you want to go to the book signing. If none of you want to go to the book signing, this is the third book I'm giving away. You just send me an email or give me your card and I'll mail you a book. Okay, so you can stand over here. Okay. Now, here's what I'd like you, what's your name? Kathy? Tracy Butz. Nice to meet you. Okay, so Kathy, I want you to think of, well, in order to get us really committed to this exercise, okay, I want you to think of 3 things that you really, really want in life. Okay, you don't have to tell me what they are. It's totally, you keep it to yourself, okay? Do you got them? Okay, that was quick, good. Okay, so now here's the deal. Okay, put your arm up here.
Which one?
Your right one. Okay. And we're going to have a little arm wrestling, okay? Now the thing is, every time our arms come down about level here, we get what we want. So every time my arm hits here, I get what I want. Every time your arm hits there, you get what you want.
Does anyone else feel like this is a trick and like she's a ninja? And
I'm not a ninja. Ready, set, go. I'm not a ninja. Okay. Okay, this time.
You want me to let you have it?
This time, she goes, you want me to let you have it? This time, follow my lead.
Oh.
Relax. Relax. Here's the point. Thank you. Let's give it up. Here's the point. If we spend all of our time ensuring that other people don't get what they want, we don't get what we want either. Instead, collaborate. Why do we have to fight other people on our teams and resist them from getting what they want? Can't we collaborate together and both get what we want? It is absolutely a powerful example to say, many of us in our organizations, when we're moving through change initiatives, it's so stressful, it's so daunting. But it doesn't mean that one person or one team or one group of individuals has to lose. We all can have some of the win. But it's how we work together and collaborate that will truly make the difference. Last, reward courage and vulnerability. Brene Brown, who is a doctor who studies vulnerability and courage at the University of Houston, has done some amazing research. And for those of you who enjoy watching TED videos, TED, she has 2 videos on there that are absolutely powerful. This particular one is not from either of those 2, but is a highly publicized video. She's going to talk about the importance of rewarding courage and vulnerability if we want our teams to continue to prosper. Let's hear Brene Brown.
You know, I always say failure is not an option. Innovation is not an option. And there's something very vulnerable about trying something new. If you're just going to repeat what everyone else is doing and make it better even, then that's a little bit less scary. But if you're going to try something new that no one else is...
Oops. Let's go back and let's go back. I don't have control anymore. Could we just move it back to that video? Oop, that's the beginning. That's the end. Just move it back 2 slides. I can't imagine doing their job. I really can't. I think they do a phenomenal job with all the speakers here. Let's give it up for our audio tech.
I always say failure is not an option.
It's all good. You know what? It's all good. So the point here today is that, if you can burn through, that would be great. The point here is that in order for our employees to take risks, we have to demonstrate not only our own courage in the way in which we lead, but also demonstrate vulnerability as a leader. Let me describe that. You know, when I told you my story of my son, that was being vulnerable on stage. But I can tell the connection that I had with several key individuals, and I would imagine more, when I told that story. And it's a true story. But it's me being vulnerable for a reason, to demonstrate an example. As leaders in our organization, or as individual contributors, we have to demonstrate a strong sense of vulnerability. Because when we do, if we do, and when we do, we can be that much more influential within not only our teams, but across the organization. And you don't have to be a leader to do it. But tell people when you're afraid. Tell people when you're unsure. Get used to saying, I don't know. 3 powerful words, I don't know. But then follow that up with, what is one thing we do know today that can help us move through this issue without knowing that? And to work together to partner and move through some of those unknowns and some of those stresses and some of those difficult moments. So choose to be vulnerable and to demonstrate that piece as a leader and as an individual contributor. And also demonstrate, because it takes courage to do that. Because when you do that, people are a little bit more apt to take risks. Not unhealthy ones, but risks that help to move the organization forward. Because as we found out from that earlier activity, there are a lot of unknowns, and sometimes we have to absolutely reach through and persevere through what we don't know. So now I'm going to ask you to consider a personal commitment. What is one thing, 2 or 3 things that you're going to do different from the strategies you heard today? What are some of those things that you're going to do, you're going to engage in for your team, your organizations, and for yourself to help you to embrace change, to not resist it, but to truly embrace it? So today we've talked about how change can represent both a challenge and an opportunity. We talked about different factors that affect our reaction, as well as the different phases of change and the impact that those have on our emotions. We also talked about dealing with change initiatives and how you can positively influence those around us. And last, we talked about adopting new tools for managing the challenges of change related to communication, productivity, and resistance. And I'd like to leave you with a quote from Maya Angelou. And she says, if you don't like something, change it. And if you can't change it, at the very least, change your attitude. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you next year. Thanks a lot.